Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg.
Hey, welcome back everybody to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Julie
and Charlie,
and we are coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only improve your health, but also increase your longevity and improve your quality of life. Now today we have a really special episode, and it is Charlie Cates's birthday week.
Woo!
So I get to interview Charlie, and we all get to learn about his story, how he came across MAT, some of his thoughts on MAT, things going on with his own body with MAT. So we're going to get the whole scoop on Charlie Cates today. So Charlie, thank you for letting me interview you today.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to go ahead and get started, and I'd love for you to tell our listeners about your story up to when you found MAT. So all your backstory before MAT has come into your life, because I think we all know that you're one of the big MAT people here, and that pretty much dominates your business now. But let's hear about what was going on before MAT entered your career world.
Sure thing. So I started off kind of in sports performance, and this really started because I played basketball all growing up. And for me, one of my big goals as a basketball player was to be able to dunk. Now, this was a goal that I had as a little kid, and it was something that I was quite passionate about. It was this idea of one day being able to dunk. Well, growing up, as I felt, my body growing and my body get stronger, I could tell that I was getting closer and closer to maybe one day being able to dunk, but I still wasn't there yet. So I started looking up to try to figure out, well, how could I possibly train my body to better be able to jump, to be stronger, to be faster. And I found these strength shoes, okay? Now, the strength shoes, if you remember from like the 90s and early 2000s, were the shoes that had the platform on the front, okay, on the toes of the shoes, and then your heel would kind of hang off. And I got those shoes when I was 14 years old, when I was in 8th grade. And I started using those shoes and started working myself out and doing the training programs that came along with them. And I started feeling my body get bigger, feeling my body get stronger, feeling my body become, more explosive and more dynamic. And I really liked that feeling of seeing my athleticism improve. So I started looking into more and more of things that I could do to help with this, whether it's different training programs, jumping rope, things like that. And then my brother started kind of doing the workouts with me. And I realized that not only did I like training myself, but I really liked training other people too, specifically from a sports performance standpoint. So he was 2 years younger than me. He was in 6th grade at the time. And, he would do all the same workouts that I would do. And that was a lot of fun for me. And then his friends started getting involved, and we would do workouts together. And that was just a total joy. Well, that happened kind of all throughout high school until I graduated high school and went on to college. And when I went on to college, I was looking at the curriculums, education curriculums at the school that I went to, and there wasn't anything offered from a kinesiology standpoint or like a sport exercise science or anything like that. So I decided, well, I'm going to study economics. Economics was of minor interest to me, but it was the closest thing to like a business degree that they had at the school that I went to. So I decided, all right, I want to study economics to get some kind of understanding of how businesses work. And the goal being, one day I'm going to open my own sports performance facility. So I would study econ in the classroom, and then after class, I would have practice for basketball. I played basketball all throughout college, but then, I'd be at the gym all the time, studying and trying things and learning, and essentially, in a way, kind of self-teaching myself the different aspects of physiology and, looking at different ways to help improve sports performance. So throughout college, my interest in sports performance continued, and I ended up, by my senior year of college, I had a number of sports teams on campus that I do kind of the strength and conditioning work for, including, with a lot of the members of the basketball team, as well as, I had 2 internships I did in sports performance. And one was in Madison, Wisconsin, and the other was in San Diego, California. And when I was in San Diego, I got to work with a lot of really cool people, a lot of professional football players like Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. But I also got introduced for the first time into training non-athletes, into training, I guess, more general population, and doing more standard personal training. And this was an interesting experience for me because I'd never done true personal training before. It was always from a sports performance perspective. But it was the first time that personal training seemed to be an enjoyable thing for me. I had it in my head up to that point that I wasn't super interested in working with non-athletes. I just wanted to work with people that were, very, what I saw as goal-driven and, needed their bodies to perform well because that was with their, athletic endeavors. And I didn't see that as necessarily being the case with non-athletes. So this was the first time that I worked with non-athletes in a manner that was kind of similar to that. And so that was fun for me. And so it kind of opened my eyes and my mind up to the idea that, hey, maybe I could train somebody other than non-athletes. So I go back to school for my senior year of college, and I start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do after college? And I had, a couple of job offers at the time. And I started, looking at other places as well. So I had, a job offer in San Diego, an offer back in Wisconsin, and I started looking at some places on the East Coast as well. And I ended up accepting a position in Greenwich, Connecticut. And so I was going to move there kind of a couple weeks after I had graduated from college. I graduated college, went back home to my parents' house in Wisconsin, and 2 weeks before I was going to move back east to Greenwich, I got a call, and my employer said, "We're going bankrupt. We're not going to have a job for you anymore." So I needed to kind of start over from looking at where I was going to work. I thought, okay, well, maybe I could go back and check out the place in San Diego. Maybe I could, go back to the place in Madison. But for whatever reason, I didn't feel particularly compelled to do that. They were all options, and they were all really great options. But something was drawing me elsewhere, and I wasn't sure where. But eventually, not eventually, a couple days after I found out that I wasn't going to be going to Connecticut, one of my former teammates from college was going to law school at Northwestern in downtown Chicago. And so, why don't you come to Chicago? There's a lot of gyms here to work at. And I know some great places. I could introduce you to, the gym that I go to. I thought, okay, cool. So I lined up 4 different interviews in the Chicago area. I ended up getting offers from all of them. And the one that I ended up deciding that, I want to go work at was in downtown Chicago in the Gold Coast area. And that's where I first got introduced to MAT. There were 2 MAT practitioners there, and that's where I kind of got my first exposure to MAT.
So perfect. Before we move into your first exposure to MAT and all that, it seemed like you went through a big shift kind of in San Diego where you were only thinking about and considering training athletes, and you were exposed to training the general population, or, what we would call personal training, just training for health, training for, whatever their goals are. What was that like? Was there a big difference in training athletes versus non-athletes, or was it pretty similar? What were your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, how they were running their classes there, they were pretty much training non-athletes in the same manner that they were training the athletes. And I think that's the style of training was very intriguing to me, and that was what was really made it interesting and made it fun. Is they're essentially training the athletes in the same manner as they're training the non-athletes. So like I could be just as rowdy with the non-athletes as I was, with the athletes, as far as being clapping and trying to be like very motivational and things like that during the sessions. And that was the energy and the environment that was created. So for me, at that point, I realized, oh, well, maybe I could create, this similar kind of environment and have a lot of fun training non-athletes in the same manner that I was training athletes.
I know you have different views on that now, so we'll see when that changes. So you started working at FFC Gold Coast, mm-hmm. and that's where you were introduced to MAT because there were two different practitioners that were currently already working there. So tell us about that. Tell us about your introduction to MAT and what was interesting to you about it, or how you got introduced to it in general.
Well, I was working, like you said, at FFC Gold Coast, and I noticed that there were these two trainers there, and there were a bunch of trainers, but there were two that really stood out. And these two trainers, there were a couple things that really stood out about them. First of all, is they were way busier than everybody else. Like they were just slammed with clients, and their clients loved them. They just absolutely loved them, and people kept trying to get on their schedule, and they just didn't have any availability. So, as a young trainer starting out, that was the kind of business that I wanted to grow mine towards. So kind of emulating that. And then the other thing is they were way more confident, or appeared to be way more confident about what they were doing with their clients. And I would see them kind of go back to the club, go to the back of the club rather, and do this weird kind of pseudo stretching thing with their clients. I had no idea what it was, but I was always taking my clients back there and stretching them. And what I would ask them, well, or what are you doing? What is that thing they're doing? And they kept calling it MAT. All right, well, we're doing MAT. We're doing MAT. Well, what is MAT? They couldn't really explain it, at least not in a way that I could understand. But what eventually happened is one of them said, well, you know what? Why don't you just lie down on the table here and let me show you? And so he did an hour of MAT on me, and that was my first experience with MAT as far as, having it done on my body. Now, like I said, I played basketball in college, and I never had really any major injuries in college. Nothing requiring surgery, nothing that really caused me to miss much time, okay? I had always had chronically sprained ankles, from the time I was in fifth grade through my senior season of college. I was always spraining at least one ankle, if not both, at least one time, if not multiple times. And there were some things that I thought were maybe starting to creep up. My back was starting to get tighter. I was starting to notice more aches and pains with my shoulders, maybe some stuff with my hips, but I was 22 years old at the time, and nothing was really taking form yet from an injury or symptom perspective. So I get on the table, and my first experience with MAT, I was pretty disconnected from my body as far as what I was able to feel. I couldn't really feel how well my body was moving. I couldn't feel whether one side couldn't move as well as the other side, and so during that first session, I couldn't really tell when things were weak or strong. I'm sure I didn't know how to relax during tests or anything like that. And so when I got up off the table, I didn't notice a tremendous change in my body. But what happened during the session is all these light bulbs started going off in my head. And what was going off in my head was that the goal of MAT, I was starting to see that. Okay, I was starting to see what at least I perceived the goal of MAT was. And the goal that I was perceiving was to just get the muscles working the way that they were supposed to work, and just get the muscles kind of back up to par. And now this was very, very exciting for me. And the reason why was because going back to my senior year of college, I kind of developed this hypothesis when it came to training athletes that if I could just get somebody's body working the way it was supposed to work, they were going to perform at a much higher level than everybody else. I figured everybody else beat themselves up so much through overtraining, through poor nutrition, not sleeping well, poor stress management, things like that, that everybody was just massively underperforming. And if I could just get somebody's body working the way it was supposed to work, I didn't have to do anything more than that. They were going to perform at a much higher level. So when I experienced MAT for the first time and I realized that that's more or less a goal of MAT from a muscular system standpoint, just to get the muscles working the way they're supposed to work, I was all in. I was completely bought into this. And I said, all right, this is something that I have to learn more about, and I have to take these courses because this to me is the missing link. This is the thing that I've been looking for quite some time now, and I was really excited about it.
Charlie, I really like your story because if you talk to most MAT specialists and you ask them, how did you get introduced to MAT, or what made you get go and get certified to do it yourself? Usually they tell you this life-changing, miraculous story of how they got on the table one time and their life was changed forever because they had, I don't know, like my story, they had fasciitis for years and years and years and then shocked that something could change it. Or they had back pain. They just couldn't believe that, this 1 hour could change their entire life. So it's interesting because a lot of specialists get into MAT off of something that drastically changes how their body feels, rather than, it kind of sounded like you got interested because of the philosophy and the overarching goal of MAT. And to be quite honest, most people don't have a life-changing experience after 1 hour. I mean, as you can imagine, if you're going to get your body to heal or improve or get better, it takes time to do that. So it's interesting that most specialists, and me included, we get into it because of a one-time experience that just blows our mind. So I think that's interesting that you were able to see the bigger picture with that. That's really unique.
No, thank you. I mean, I think, I was fortunate that it happened that way. I was fortunate that, I was open to seeing things in that manner. But I think that initial experience and viewing MAT that way has really shaped the lens that I viewed it through from the get-go. So I've really never seen it as kind of a symptom addressing kind of technique. I've always seen it as a get your body functioning well process. And so that's helped me, I think, really communicate it from that manner, from that standpoint, about why MAT is important and what the value of MAT is, outside of any kind of change in symptoms, just really making sure that your body's working well. And so I think that initial perspective really helped drive home that idea for me.
Yeah, that's really huge because if you haven't heard about MAT, go back to our podcast. I think it's number 3. It's called What is MAT? But anyways, you'll learn that MAT helps the body function the way it's designed to function, which a lot of times are symptoms and aches and pains that we feel can just be a result of not that there's a problem, but your body's just not operating the way it should operate. So it just kind of normalizes the body or brings the body back to like level state, I guess. So it's really cool that you were able to view that in the beginning, and really that is the end goal. So you started out with the best mindset possible, I think. So going from there, tell us about your first classes with MAT, and then I know that you just went for it. You were all in. Tell us about that story about, getting into MAT in the beginning and then just continuing to work through these classes and courses and the different levels of MAT.
Yeah, so that first MAT experience I had, that was back in August of 2010. So 8 years ago now. And I had no idea when the classes would be available. As a naive 22-year-old, I thought, well, they're going to be immediately available. Why wouldn't they? And it actually kind of turned out to work that way, where within a few months, so January of 2011, the introductory courses, what's called the Jumpstart program, came to Chicago. And so I was able to take that. That was a kind of 3-weekend course spread out over 3 months. And then, of course, in my head, I'm thinking, well, the next level, which is the specialist program, back then it's called the internship, now it's called the specialist program, thinking, okay, well, why wouldn't that immediately come to Chicago? And again, it kind of turned out to work that way, where in June of 2011, the specialist program came to Chicago. So I signed up for that right away. So I was very fortunate where, like, at the peak of my excitement for starting MAT, I only had to wait a few months before enrolling in the courses.
Yeah, I just want to highlight this because, so I lived in Florida when I went through, and I was the first Florida class. And luckily, I had just found out about MAT, so I was kind of in the same shoes as Charlie. I think I had to wait maybe 4 months. Mm-hmm. But when I got into class, there were people in my class that were like, I've been waiting 5 years for it to come to Florida so that I could learn, so I could become an MAT specialist. Because of course you can travel, and fly once a month to the location, but maybe you don't have the means to do it, or your business doesn't allow you to, or whatever you have going on. So people will wait years and years. So I just want to highlight that because Charlie and I didn't know. We were like, oh, perfect. In a couple of months, the class starts.
Right.
I'll go ahead and sign up.
Exactly. And not only does it start, but it starts like just down the street from where I'm working. So, why wouldn't it be that convenient?
Yeah, you're really lucky because little did you know, you jumped into one of the larger communities of MAT. So luckily there were all the classes in Chicago all the time.
Yeah, that worked out really well. So I dive into the specialist program, and like I said, that was June of 2011. Started going through those classes. Then January of 2012, it was the 6th weekend of the MAT specialist program, and it was going to be a 4-day weekend. And one of the days, the first day, Tom Purvis was going to present. And Tom Purvis is the developer of RTS, and he came in and he started speaking about how the majority of the fitness industry is focused on either A, training athletes, or B, trying to train non-athletes like athletes. And yet the vast majority of the population doesn't like the way that exercise is currently laid out. And so from a business perspective, it would make far more sense to look at training non-athletes like non-athletes. Look at training them in a completely different manner than what the traditional fitness industry provides. And this was the first time that I had heard this argument made, and that's when my viewpoint started to shift on things. Is okay, well, maybe I don't go into sports performance, because my idea still was, yes, I was working as a personal trainer, but my idea still was, okay, I'm going to learn MAT, I'm going to open up my own sports performance facility, and I'm going to use MAT to help my athletes, perform at the highest level they can. And then once I heard Tom speak, that started to shift my brain. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe there's something more here than just sports performance. Maybe I can use MAT for a completely different reason other than helping athletes perform well. And so I started thinking about this more and more, and started to become more and more intrigued with this idea of using MAT with and for a population other than athletes, or other than people that are trying to push their physical limits or physically perform their absolute best. And so that was in January of 2012. I ended up graduating from the specialist program in March of 2012 and testing out in April of 2012. And during that time, I started going to some more of these resistance training specialist classes and learning more about how to train people in a way that is different than the sports performance way that I was accustomed to. Is more like, how can you build exercise for somebody's body? So look at all the different limitations they have. Look at how their body is functioning well and how it's not functioning well. Build exercise from the ground up for them. And this got me really, really excited. And it started to blend. I could see how it was blending perfectly with what I had learned with MAT. But I still wasn't completely past the idea that, all right, well, maybe I need to do sports performance, or maybe I should do sports performance. So I decided I'm going to give it one last go. And I ended up taking a summer internship with Northwestern University's sports performance program, and worked pretty closely with their basketball team during the summer of 2012. And it was a really good experience. I liked the staff. I liked working with the players. But at the end of that summer, I realized that, sports performance just isn't for me anymore, that I had kind of matured in how I viewed exercise and matured as far as how I wanted to use exercise to help people. And it was no longer about being able to push people to their maximum and, working with these high-level bodies that could pretty much tolerate anything, which means from a training perspective, I could pretty much do anything with them. It became more of a puzzle to me in figuring out, okay, how can I work with somebody with all the limitations and maybe dysfunctions that they have with their body, and apply exercise to their system in a way that builds up their body and doesn't make them worse. And so that part became very intriguing to me, and I started to make this drastic shift in how I was working with people. Still going through the kind of the MAT courses. By this time I had dived into the master's courses for MAT and started those in September 2012, kind of went all the way through those, started assisting classes assisting the instruction of classes in March of 2013. And then in June of 2013, I started the MAT RX program. So Greg Roscoff, the developer of MAT, right when I graduated from the specialist program, he kind of released a next level of MAT, which was the MAT RX program. And so I was fortunate enough that, again, in my head, I was thinking, well, why would I have to wait very long to get into this? But I was very fortunate enough to get through the master's courses and then be invited into the second group of the MAT RX courses, which started then in June of 2013. And then in July of 2013, I was able to test out for my mastery certification for MAT. And then the RX program, that was an extensive program that really lasted nearly 4 years. It was 3 years and 9 months. And then I was able to graduate from that in February of 2017.
So awesome. So that takes us to where we are today, basically. So tell us about, what is your business like now? What kind of people do you help? What kind of people do you service? Because I know that the last time we talked about your business, you were in training the general population like athletes. But since then, you've come across MAT, you've come across the resistance training specialist, which you had mentioned has, really, really changed your viewpoint on exercise and the body. So tell us about, what are you doing today?
Yes, and today the vast majority of my kind of client hours are spent doing MAT RX. Probably 90% of my week is spent doing MAT RX, which I greatly enjoy. The other 10% of my week is spent doing personal training, but not anything like how it looked before for me. So before, it was, like I said, I was training non-athletes like they were athletes, and there were a lot of issues that come up with that. And so that 10% of the time I spend training, it's very customized exercise, kind of built from the ground up for that person's body, and it all really revolves around MAT and what's going on with their body from a muscle contraction standpoint and from a joint motion standpoint. So figuring those things out, making sure that the joints are moving well, the muscles are contracting well, and then once we can ensure that, it's like, okay, now we can go load you and get those systems of your body functioning and working better.
I didn't know you, Charlie, when you were at FFC, so I can't say I know what you used to do with your clients, but I have seen the YouTube videos of you training yourself back in the day. But I mean, it's pretty miraculous what you're able to do with your skill set. I mean, I've seen you work with people that can't walk. I've seen you work with people that look healthy and fit and they're just really busy. I've seen you get people out of walking canes. So it's really, really impressive. Just, when you've taken the time to educate yourself on how can we use this thing called exercise and really improve someone's body. So it's been really cool to watch, as I get to watch you every single day, and a lot of our listeners don't have the pleasure of getting to do that.
No, well, thank you. Yeah, it's funny you bring up YouTube. I was putting up workout videos before it was cool to do that on Instagram. So
You were cool before it was cool.
I was recording myself working out on these little handheld cameras, spending hours uploading and editing to YouTube, and I have hundreds of videos on there from my much younger days. So those are sometimes entertaining to look back at.
Yeah. Well, we got to start somewhere. So I know you've been through a lot with muscle activation techniques for your personal health and your personal and how your body works. So tell us about that. What kind of obstacles have you overcome by getting worked on with MAT? Because I know I work on you every single week. And then often when you're out in Denver, you get worked on by some other practitioners there. So tell us about that. How has it affected you personally?
MAT has been such a physical lifesaver for me from a orthopedic standpoint and from a function standpoint. I talked about earlier the number of sprained ankles that I had suffered, and fortunately, I never had an injury that ever required me to get surgery, but those sprained ankles really started to wreak havoc on my body in my kind of early to mid 20s. I mean, it was to the point where I couldn't go running for 10 minutes without the entire right side of my body starting to tighten up, everywhere from my foot all the way up to my neck. And it was pretty horrible. And I remember I remember riding in my car and seeing somebody kind of running down the street, and they were probably mid 50s. They were like overweight, and I mean, not like drastically overweight, but they were definitely overweight. And I remember sitting in my car thinking, how come their body can do that, but myself, early 20s, former college basketball player, work out all the time, I can't do that without my entire body tightening up and just feeling awful for hours afterwards. And it wasn't until I really started to get my feet worked on a consistent basis, initially with MAT, but then the most impactful thing with far and away was the MAT RX that was done on my feet, that all those issues started to go away. That my feet used to be so rigid. It was just like I had bricks for feet, and just my feet have been moving better. And then, the tightness I used to experience in my knees and my hips and my low back and my shoulder and up into my neck really just started to dissipate. And, now I can go running whenever I want to. The limiting factor is not my body, but more my interest level in doing it. I have a hard time staying interested in running for more than 40 to 60 minutes. I know some people can run for much longer than that, but myself, that's not my cup of tea. So, but I can do it. I can do it without issue now, and I can do it multiple times a week. And so that's just really been wonderful. All the little aches and pains that were starting to creep up in my mid-20s with my shoulders, my back, all that stuff really gets dissipated. And the greatest thing now is if I ever push myself too hard, or if I ever start to feel like my body's tweaked, the MAT has always been the thing to kind of bring everything kind of back to normal for me, and get everything working the way it was supposed to work. And all those little tweaks, all those little symptoms, they go away, and they're much easier to address now because, fortunately, I get tuned up by you every week. And so that's just been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you get worked on every week. Usually when you get on the table, there's not much going on, maybe just some little bit of tightness or whatever. But it is pretty amazing for your body just to see how one area, your feet, have such a big impact on how your knees feeling, how your hips feeling, how your trunk is feeling, how your shoulders feeling. So although we do have to work on other areas, it is amazing how when your feet aren't functioning well, the rest of your body doesn't feel good. So I think that if you didn't have MAT, you'd probably think that you had a shoulder problem, back problem, a hip problem, a knee problem. And instead it's like, wait a second, when my feet work well, nothing bothers me. So really, do I really have a problem there? So
right, exactly. Yeah, my feet are far and away a really impactful area for the rest of my body. So that's been awesome to be able to experience.
Nice. So to wrap things up, Charlie, where do you see yourself going in the future with all these skills that you've built up? I mean, you're in your early 30s, so you still have a lot of time to help others and improve others' bodies. What do you see happening in your future?
One of the things that really drives me is the idea of mastery, and mastery as something that is an asymptote, is something that you can get closer to, but ultimately is unattainable. But still, the drive and the journey towards mastery is really fascinating to me. And so I see just getting more solid, just continuing to refine, continuing to improve, continuing to get more solid with the skill set that I have. I know there are many people out there that want to diversify as much as possible, and that really is of zero interest to me at this point. It's how good can I become at this thing that I've been learning, this MAT thing? How skilled can I become at this? And, when I look back at kind of all the timeline of the decisions that were made, whether it was the different internships I went to, or the decision not to, pursue job offers in San Diego or in Madison, or even, 3 days after I graduated college, I had Jonathan Kraft's secretary, who's the president of the New England Patriots, call me up and say, we want you to come in to interview for a strength and conditioning position. And without a second thought, I said, oh no, I'm good. I already have a job. That was a major sports franchise that called me up. And, there was stupid logistical things that went through my head, like, oh, I'm in Boston right now. How am I going to, but I have a flight tonight. How am I going to cancel my flight and then get back to Boston or whatever for an interview in 3 days? Like, there were just stupid things that were going through my 22-year-old head that, looking back is like, well, those were complete non-issues, but for whatever reason, I said, no, I'm good. I had a job. I have a job offer, and at the time I did, and then that ended up falling through. So, why did I decline that? Why did that job fall through? Why, out of all the places in Chicago that I interviewed, was FFC the first place I started? And it keeps coming back to, finding out about MAT, to learning MAT. Why did the classes line up perfectly where I could go from one to the next, and they just happened to be going on just blocks from where I was working at the time? I didn't have to fly anywhere, to get the introductory courses and the intermediate courses. Why was, everything kind of laid out in that manner? And I don't know that I have a reason as to why, but I do know that this is something that I've been fortunate enough to pursue with a great amount of passion and a tremendous interest, and that is where my interest currently lies, just continuing to get better at this thing, continuing to improve my skill set, and then doing really, really cool things at our business here with using this skill set and incorporating it with exercise and completely transforming how people view and utilize exercise and the way they see exercise in their minds from a health perspective, from a performance perspective, and from a function perspective.
Well, I'm so glad that you had an open enough mind to trust your journey and take the journey that was presented to you, because that's what led you to meet me, and it's what led you to be able to build this practice in Schaumburg, and so many people in this community have really greatly improved their life because of you. So I am thankful that you were open to that. Anyways, if you would like to connect with Charlie, maybe you've got some questions for him, or maybe, if you can't tell, he is a phenomenal practitioner and very passionate about what he does, and maybe you need to get in his schedule, you can contact him by emailing him at charlie@matschaumburg.com. If you have a question about our podcast, you can certainly email us at info@matschaumburg. We also always do a Q&A episode, so we are looking for your questions for next month. Additionally, if you wouldn't mind going over to iTunes, reviewing us, letting us know your thoughts, you can always give us a 5-star review. We love that. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it, because that's what allows others that don't currently know about us find out about us. Last but not least, we are so grateful that you have tuned in to listen to our podcast today. And if you aren't already following us on Facebook and Instagram, please do so by following us on Facebook at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, or on Instagram at MAT Schaumburg. We will catch you all next week.
What?
I'm just trying to think of where I want to go now.
Oh, was that boring?
No.
Oh, because you look really bored while I'm talking.
I'm just getting really tired.
Oh,